according to recommendations from its National Policy Conference, the ANC has rejected wholesale nationalisation. That's in favour of strategic nationalisation. The ruling party called for transformative state intervention in the economy, which could take many forms. And for more, Claude Bysack, Managing Director at UNOMEX, joins us. Well, of course, we're all waiting to hear, what does strategic nationalisation hold for us?
Well, you tell me, Bronwyn. It seems that it's a return to the terms of the 1992 Ready to Govern document, in fact, which is quite interesting. This is what it says in 1992, that the state may privatize or may nationalize strategic industries on the basis of the balance of evidence. So someone at the ANC has very craftily managed to compromise this very muddy landscape and come up with some sort of a return to the future. The problem with that, obviously, is that A, we don't really know what it means, and second is that it arrives at a very poor time in terms of confidence in the mining sector and the performance of the economy as a whole.
We may as well, I mean, does this mean we're just going to close shop on the mining sector? You can see the likes of Anglo's, BHP, they're saying South Africa's a no-go area.
It's just not worth it, and that's what's happened is since 2001, you've had the mining industry has basically stagnated, as has manufacturing and agriculture. Policy uncertainty, because investment in these sectors need long timelines, and what's been happening, you've been shortening the timelines. It's just not worth it to keep a marginal shaft open, and basically the proof of the pudding is in the eating already. We don't need to look elsewhere. 2001, South Africa was the biggest producer of gold. The gold hasn't disappeared. We've still got most of any country in the world, the most gold in the ground that can be mined, and it's been sterilized. It's just not worth keeping a marginal shaft going. What's actually going to happen is we're now fifth biggest gold producer. By next year we'll be sixth biggest gold producer, and the industry, instead of being a 100-year industry, is basically a 4- or 5-year industry being slammed into the ground. It's like the British motor industry. It was smashed because of the interference of exactly these kind of things, where government intrusion into the actual industry with unions driving it. Nobody, even British people didn't want to buy British-made cars, etc.
It's nothing short of a train smash.
Well, it is. I'd just like to know what exactly they're planning to achieve by the strategic nationalisation. I mean, if you're going to go into strategically nationalise certain sectors of the economy that are already struggling, what do they think that government's going to do in an environment that business hasn't already succeeded or is already battling because of unionisation and various other input costs that are hamstringing these industries? So what is exactly the outcome that they're looking for?
And what is the example out there of, strategic nationalisation that has worked? I mean, you're assuming that it's a stake in strategic assets like a Sasol.
The reality is that we can't beat up the term nationalisation too much. I mean, there are sometimes, in some points in history, at some historical conjunctures of some countries, some need for nationalisation. The reality is that this is not the case here. The mining industry is a mature industry. It's extremely capital intensive. It's extremely cost intensive. It requires very deep pocket and long-term perspectives on the part of the investor to guarantee some sort of a return on investment. The conditions are just not there. And the ANC is focusing on the fundamentally wrong problem. It's entirely out of sync with reality, with the national reality of the sector and the national reality of the entire economy. But this is a political
beast. It's what people want to hear ahead of
It is a political beast. It is not the product of some rational economic theory that has evolved organically within the ANC. It's a monster created in 2009 by Julius Malema and his associates, who had some plans to benefit from some sort of a bailout by the state, and it has taken a life of its own, very, very politically convenient for a lot of factions within the ANC. And now what the ANC bureaucracy or leadership is trying to do is to control this monster by coming with terms that still contain nationalisation in them, to satisfy, but box it in somehow, so that they have some sort of control when in 2020 12, the 13, the election is over, and obviously you probably have the same leadership in place, and they can just put it in a box and wait.
Yeah.
But the cat is out of the box
But
with
that's,
that,
but that's
unfortunately.
the issue. That's what we've been discussing this on the show before. And with regards to what happened at Lonmin, and with regards to what's currently happening both in the trucking sector as well as in the remainder of the mining sector, the government isn't stepping up to the plate and making their voice heard. Why? Because there's underlying political issues that are at play.
Yeah, you can't offend the unions, for instance, because ahead of the electoral conference. So policy is being boxed. You can choose in the for mining policy effectively between awful and ghastly. So now we can go to the mining industry. Which would you like? Would you like the awful policy or the ghastly policy?
Correct.
Etc. I don't know what.
Well, I mean, you know, if we look at it, you know, the big picture is that, and I'm going to put my feet in it, you know, is that the alliance is not working for the country. And we're seeing that in terms of what's happening in the labour environment, where the presence of COSATU in the alliance was supposed to create a long-term stability in terms of labour relations. This hasn't worked. So there are real issues there. And we're seeing that from a policy formulation standpoint, it is not working. It is leading to policy and political compromises between factions which serve very narrow vested interest at the expense of economic growth and therefore at the expense of the poor.
Yeah.
But that boils back down to what we were discussing earlier, and then we're at the risk again of further downgrades because of this kind of issue.
Yeah.
And further downgrades impact not just sectors, this impacts the entire economy.
Yeah.
And that's politically and instability.
You know, one of the problems is that we've got almost the development of the union movement into what, how can you describe it? Cannon fodder unions. In other words, the way the interests of the membership is not the same as the interests of the leadership, and you using your members as cannon fodder on behalf of the poor, of course, and of course that's not happening.
I'm thoroughly disturbed,
Sorry.
but we're out of time.
Already.
So I'm going to bed disturbed tonight. Thanks very much for that update. It deserves more time. We will obviously be discussing it extensively as we progress with the news flow unfolding on the political front.